Janet and Frank Fannin are putting together the program, so we thought it appropriate for Janet to have a chance to just introduce the program next year before it gets lost into the conversation
next month.
This program.
Soon.
So we'll be back at the Hermitage next program. We're looking forward to your attendance. We have a great attendance, over 80 people tonight. We like to see what's happening here. The attendance continues to grow. The issues continue to be on our plate, and we're thankful that we have a role in Alexandria to debate the issues without taking sides. And tonight it's Here Come the Millennials. Let's have all the Millennials. Give them a hand. We've been doing this for 20 years. It's important that we mention that because we've done over 160 neutral, nonpartisan programs on issues of interest to Alexandria. And this month, as you know, we're going to talk about millennials, about an Alexandria that's growing, about millennials who have their place, have found their place, and have interests that we'd like to talk about. But we open with a special Alexandria edition of the match game. You'll see it play out in a moment. We are the contestants up front. I know that Mike will explain the rules and the details, but it should be fun. You have some baby boomers here and you have some millennials on the other side, and I guarantee our answers will not be the same in this particular test. Our expert panel of successful millennials that we have actually as part of the program shatters a few myths and shares some perspectives on their generation. And with regard to our elected representative, Congresswoman Pepper, thank you for being with us tonight. It's very nice to see you. This is my classmate Bill Ewell in the back from TC Williams. Bill, thanks for joining us. We are glad to have you with us tonight, glad to be part of this conversation with us. We are thankful to Bittersweet for catering. Pretty good food tonight, huh? By the way, in a place where Agenda Alexandria started, right here, 20 years ago. And the Gantmans, they drove over and parked right here. Not at all. They walked over. Thanks for being, and really, we're very thankful to the congregation, to the temple. We're very thankful to the synagogue that allows us to be here. We will be back here on the 20th anniversary, coming up in June. More in details on that. Watch for the program, watch for the details. Thankful that we can use this facility tonight and on the 20th for our anniversary. TC Williams, TV Media Group. Where are you? Back in the back. Let me tell you, they did sound checks for an hour and a half. It's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. But more importantly, they're filming. They're filming for the channel that we have on YouTube. You can find the program in about a month. Thank you to TC Williams as ever for putting the program together and filming it. Now, if you're a member and haven't received our annual program directory, there's still program directories out front at the check-in table. Please pick it up at the registration table. It's available to members, including anyone who purchased a membership tonight. Who purchased a membership tonight? Stand up, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. All right, free dessert. Right here. No, thank you very much. Who is at Agenda for the very first time? Oh, my goodness. We couldn't be happy. By the way, I want to make sure we welcome our Committee of 100 from Arlington. Thank you very much. He's the chairman over there. We're glad you're with us. We learned from him, he's learned from us, and he's eating our food. Please consider patronizing the businesses you find in the directory and the advertisers that are supporting us tonight. We have, as you know, a number of advertisers with us. Paul Kent's out there. I think you met him. There he is, Paul. Thank you. He's one of our sponsors, the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce. We've got FMK, Financial Literacy Center, Florence. I know you're here. Thank you very much, Florence. Hoffheimer Security and Captain Token, the magician. He lit his wallet on fire earlier. I was about ready to douse him with an extinguisher. He put it out himself. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What's that? You have a drink? What's that? Oh yeah, we're not done. Life and Estate Planning Law Center, Honest Air Heating and Air Conditioning, Donna. Thank you. Barbara Anderson, thank you. Again, Redmond, thank you so much. The law firm is always with us and supports us. Renner and Company, Simpson Development. Thank you, Simpson Development, very much. State Farm, SunTrust Mortgage. Frank is he's in Naples, Florida right now. He sends his best. Janet, Synergy Home Care, County West, thank you very much for your sponsorship. Woods Landscaping and Sprinkler Service, that's Jim Wood, my brother from another mother, thank you very much. And the Zebra newspaper, who've been so supportive of us all the way along. Those are our advertisers, those are our sponsors, those are the people who help us support this program, and you as well for attending the program and allowing us to serve you as we tee up the issues. We've got flyers at the table. You'll see them there. It advertises the programs that are upcoming. It has information going forward with regard to the program on the road rage program. We have stickies on the table. You see those stickies, those yellow stickies with a pen? If you have questions after we finish the program, you write them down. Several of us will come around, pick them up, and give them to Michael, and Michael will use his expert journalist talent, and he'll decide which questions get asked. We try to answer as many as we can. We try to get as close to 9 o'clock, 8:50, so we can say thanks to people. We'll get the program in, you'll get your questions answered, and one of the three of us is going to win the match game. I'll tell you that. All right, we're heading for, at this point, a thank you to our program chair. Really, we had 4 people working this program: Paul Kentz, Elizabeth Bennett Parker, Terry Hauser, and Michael Pope. Let's get all the board members, please stand. All the board members, please stand. We have 2 up here, and they too are part of the program. It's an activist program. We work on the program together, and to those who helped put it together tonight, thank you very much. Terry, thank you for the audio visual watch. I know it's going to wow everybody. That said, I want to introduce Carrie. Carrie is going to introduce the program. We're going from that to there. Thank you so much for being here. The most important part of this program is your attendance and your support of Agenda Alexandria. Terry, over to you.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology. That's very good. Are you adept at Excel?
No.
PowerPoint?
No.
Publisher?
Not really.
Exactly in what area of technology are you proficient?
Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, Twitter. You know, the big ones.
I'm surprised you didn't say Facebook.
That's for old people, like my parents. That's funny.
Well, Amy, when you're working for me, you have to have those kind of research skills, because I'll send you things for you to comb through and get the answers and send them to me. So for that, you got to be really good at technology.
For stuff like that, no problem. I'll just ask Siri.
You'll just ask Siri?
You know, Siri tell me this, Siri find me that. We're all good getting you the answers.
Tell Siri I want you ready to go at 8 sharp each and every morning.
I don't understand.
What don't you understand?
What you just said.
You don't understand be ready to go?
No. You said 8, right?
Yes.
8 like in the morning 8?
Yes, in the morning.
Yeah. That kind of doesn't work for me. Who gets up at 8?
I do.
I Skype with my French boyfriend in Paris until like 3 in the morning. I don't even get to Starbucks until like 10, where I order my grande chai tea latte, 3 pump skim milk, light water, 2% foam, extra hot but not too hot. So if it's okay, I work best in the morning at 10:45.
Wow. Amy, I don't think we're going to be a good fit.
Why are you so negative? I can sense your hostilities, and right now I am not feeling very safe. I've been here for over 5 minutes, and the only nice thing you have said to me was nice resume, which I typed all night for this meeting with you. You've given me no guidance, no validation, no encouragement, no supervision. Is there an HR director somewhere?
HR director?
Yes, I need to speak to someone. I may have to take off today as a mental health day.
Take today off. Amy, look at me. You don't work here.
Are you firing me?
Okay, yes.
Well, we laugh because Amy is a stereotype of the millennials. Lazy, entitled, narcissistic, We know many millennials who are just the opposite. Hardworking, serious professionals who have adulthood and who are contributing members of our community. Two of them serve on our board and are part of our co-producers tonight, Elizabeth Bennett Parker and Paul Kentis. I'm a baby boomer. And for most of my lifetime, my generation has been the dominant generation. Schools were built for us when we started elementary school. Advertising revolved around us from the time post-serial started until just recently. And the previous generation was pushed to early retirement to make room for us. Now, everything has changed. In 2015, millennials overtook boomers as the largest population group in the country, and they'll dominate for years to come. Several people have asked, who are millennials? What's the definition? And there's a lot of differing definitions. The Pew Research Center has been studying the millennial generation for more than a decade, and they define the generation as those who were born between 1981 and 1996. So people between ages 22 and 37 this year. Most millennials were between 5 and 20 when 9/11 happened. They grew up in the shadow of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They came of age during the internet explosion. They're connected, and they live in a world dominated by technology and rapid change. And they entered adulthood at the height of the economic recession. Today, millennials occupy the largest percentage of the workforce and are 30% of the voting age population. And millennials will account for 1/3 of all retail spending in the next 5 years. In other words, the millennials are here. And in Alexandria, they're here in force. The Alexandria Department of Planning and Zoning reports that compared to the U.S. population at large, Alexandria has a greater share of singles and young couples in their late 20s and 30s, the millennial years. The data from the Census Bureau's American Community Survey shows 28.2% of Alexandria's population is between 20 and 34. The median age of our population, surprisingly for some of us, is 36.2 years old. In 2016, Smart Asset named Alexandria the nation's best city for millennials, citing an unemployment rate among millennials of only 2.27%, a low poverty rate, and rents that only took an average of 27% of income. I think that just says we're making pretty good incomes in Alexandria. This year, Alexandria was number 9 in its website's ranking of the cities in the nation that are best for millennials, falling behind neighboring Arlington. Tonight's program is designed to help bring about a fuller understanding of this rising generation who will shape our city and our country for years to come. Everything from lifestyles and politics to family, fun, and communication. And to kick it off, we're going to play a little game. So let's bring out our host, Michael Lee Pope, to play the match game.
So raise your hand if you've ever seen the match game, know anything about the match game, are familiar with the match game, like the match game. Now, raise your hand if you have never once seen the match game, don't know what we're talking about, never heard of it. Okay. Wow, that's actually a pretty surprising group of people.
If I'd seen it, I'd kept going.
Change the channel.
So I'm going to ask that our contestants come on down. We're going to put our millennial celebrities up here on the board. We're going to play a game of the match game.
Come down.
Is everybody here for this?
I'm already here because it would take us too
I'm
long.
not sure.
I was going to go the other way on Official.
All right. So if you've seen the match game, you know the idea is that there's a question that includes a blank. I'm going to read the questions and
Water for everybody.
contestants answer hopefully one way or the other. Now, first thing I want to say is, if you've seen the game, you know that there are contestants, like essentially people off the street.
Are we contestants?
In this case, those are our board members. Interestingly enough, what we're doing here, they're actually all baby boomers.
Boomers!
So we actually didn't quite plan it, but it ended up working out this way. We've got a game this evening of millennials versus baby boomers. Which I have to say,
What about older?
The silent generation.
we'll get to older. My generation has also skipped this, right? I'm a Gen Xer myself, I have to say. And there are some certain, yes, so we've got generations that are not represented in the game. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be tons of fun.
Tons.
So we are, what I'm going to ask is, when I ask the question, it's going to include a blank. Everybody is going to write down their answer, what they think is going to fill in the blank. And at that point, we're going to give them the time to make sure that they've got the right opportunity to ask the question. But so I'm going to ask all of our celebrity panelists and all of our boomer contestants and all of our celebrity millennial panelists to write as large as you possibly can. I'm going to ask you to write as large as you possibly can so everybody in the audience can see what you're writing. And we are going to go right actually into the first question, which should be an easy question. So I've designed this so our first question is such that everybody should get the same answer and we can all write it down. So are we all ready to play the match game?
We use both sides.
Yes.
All right. This is the first question, ladies and gentlemen. Gen X Julie asked Millennial Mason if she wanted to watch the latest episode of The Crown. Millennial Mason said he's waiting for the season to be over so that he can blank.
You're cheating. I'm the best millennial.
Probably true.
Okay.
All right.
They were basically nice.
All right, looks like everybody is ready.
Okay.
Where's the light with the...
This one, by the way, was designed to be easy, so. All right, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to go with our baby boomer panel here first. So Janet Barnett,
Oh, come on.
you are first.
I'm so embarrassed.
Okay.
So I wrote Watch Game of Thrones.
All right, that's great answer. Okay, Bob Wood, you're next.
Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Right there.
It's somewhere in there. Big. All right, Katie also has Ben. All right, so Ben is obviously sort of the most obvious answer. Although I'd like to.
Okay, not so obvious.
All right, so we're going to go on our celebrity panel. We're going to go left to right here. So Stephen Parker.
Binge. Hold it up.
All right, Whitney Pipkin.
Binge.
Andrew Lund.
I said binge watch, Michael. Binge watch.
What is binge watch?
Katie Hansen. Stranger Things. Okay, I'm going to ask our judges. We've got two judges here, Paul and Elizabeth. Is this good?
No, it's a different show. No.
It's a different show. I know. I'm just
totally
testing
different
our
show.
judges here.
Elizabeth and Paul.
We'll give points to Janet.
Oh, there we go. Those are known as board points.
This is 70 points. Okay, all right. And Ricardo Alfaro.
Binge watch.
Binge watch. And Ben Lyon. Binge. Okay, all right. So we've got Paul in the back here is our scorekeeper. So we've got, he's ladies and gentlemen, he's already put this in an Excel spreadsheet.
That's our treasurer.
He is the Agenda Alexandria treasurer. And he loves, all right. So are we ready, ladies and gentlemen?
We've got
Are we ready for our second and more challenging question? Is that a yes? Okay. Millennial Mark
they're the ones that
dropped his cell phone in a bucket of water. Baby boomer Brandon told him to put it in some rice, but he didn't have any, so instead he used some blank.
I can't spell it. I don't think. I think that's how it's spelled. We'll see. Oh yeah. Okay.
No, I'm just guessing.
That's what I think it is.
Okay, we're going to start with Janet Barnett.
Game of Thrones.
The answer is not Game of Thrones.
I'm just so old. I would just go get a new one.
All right, I like that answer. Bob Wood. Oatmeal. Oatmeal. Okay. Lentils. Okay.
Let's see what they got.
Stephen Parker.
Vulgar.
Wait, judges? Vulgar?
Yeah, right.
Wrong.
It's the
What's your
trivia
opinion?
screen.
Oh,
I'm gonna go with the right answer.
Quinoa. Andrew Lund.
Also chose quinoa, Michael. Quinoa.
Okay. Kate Hansen.
Stereotype life.
Quinoa. Quinoa. Ben Lund.
Cross the bar.
Hey, oatmeal does stuff for us.
Even though the millennial and me would
Oh, sure enough. That's right. That's right.
Quinoa was the answer.
You got your vulture.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next question. All right. Are we ready for the next question, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Millennial Mary went out to dinner with some friends. The restaurant would only take one credit card. Mary paid the bill and told everyone else to pay her back by blank.
Try to do this one because it's different.
Told her to pay back by blank. That was the quickest one. So, Janet Barnett. Okay.
Okay.
How do we pay Janet Barnett?
Okay, so I'm
You can use the microphone, Janet.
I'm close. I'm kind of close. Pay them on their phone or use Facebook.
Janet has covered all the bases. Judges, keep those.
not really me.
PayPal. Okay. Not a good response from you. Pretty good.
This tummy feels
Is this what SunTrust
Venmo. All right, Stephen Parker.
I said Bitcoin. It was dinner.
Venmo. Andrew Lund.
I was really trying to help Mr. Wood out, so PayPal, everybody. All right.
Katie Hansen. Venmo. Carter Alvaro.
Wow.
Is someone keeping score, by the way?
She's winning.
Got points now?
I'm like so.
Keep me on track here.
Hey, just Google it. Just Google it.
Yeah, right.
Just Google it. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, are we ready for the next question? Millennial Matt was trying to help Greatest Generation Gabe with his finances, which were all out of whack. Millennial Max said, it's time to cut the cord. Greatest Generation Gabe didn't quite understand. Instead of canceling his cable subscription, he took a pair of scissors to his blank.
Yeah, please read everything.
All right. Greatest Generation Gabe. Millennial Matt was trying to help Greatest Generation Gabe with his finances, which were all out of whack. Millennial Matt said, it's time to cut the cord. Greatest Generation Gabe didn't quite understand. Instead of canceling his cable subscription, he took a pair of scissors to his blank. Took a pair of scissors to his blank.
Oh,
Just go with it. Whatever you want to cut.
that's bad.
Hey, we got allies flashing signs
By
from
the
the
way,
audience.
questions are going to be harder.
Okay.
I see everyone is stuff right. All right, so we're going to start with Janet Barnett.
Okay, so
We still have one more running.
in all due respect, I cheated. Okay.
What does it say?
Belly button.
Belly button. Belly button. How was that cheating?
Right, yeah.
Because you took from Bob?
No.
I didn't do belly button.
All right. Bob Wood.
Phone line.
Phone line.
Phone line, okay.
More confused.
Katie Coates.
How do you want to, like, electrical cord?
Electrical cord.
Is there anything like that? I think you get.
Judges, keep in mind what our answers are. Okay, all right. Stephen Parker.
Toaster.
Toaster. Toaster, all right. All right.
Dial-up.
Dial internet.
I've been alive for a while.
Andrew Lund.
This time I'm going with
Andrew's
Mrs.
with
Cook.
me.
TV. Cut the TV cord. Yeah.
Katie Hansen. Landline telephone.
That's a good one.
Ricardo Rapper.
I actually came out empty. I don't.
Totally blank.
Yeah, I got landline.
Landline. We got one match.
I got some ground. No, I had a couple.
Oh, couple, I'm sorry.
Landline, telephone.
The answer is whatever they come up with.
The match was with landline.
Close enough too.
I got one.
Not a right answer.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Are you not liking the game?
Every day my parents are like, why don't you have a landline?
She's still on the belly button.
That was not bad.
All right, so are we ready for our next question, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Millennial adjacent, not millennial, but millennial adjacent Alice says she's no millennial because she was born in 1980. So she couldn't possibly be a millennial because she remembers using a blank. She remembers, she can't possibly be a millennial because she remembers way back in the old days when she used a blank.
I got it.
All right.
People seem to have stopped writing. All right.
We still have some more writing.
All right. You know
Some
what?
thinking. There's some
I'm
thinking.
thinking really hard.
To be fun, I'm going to go in reverse order. Katie Cook.
Well,
80.
I could have.
Dictionary.
Dictionary. She remembers using a dictionary. So old school, right? Bob Wood.
Well, back to the telephone, you know, the
Remembers
regular
using a telephone.
landline. Yeah.
Oh, we're talking about landline here?
Landline again, yeah.
Okay, all right. And Janet Barnett.
Record player.
Record player. I like this. We're going to go in reverse order. Ben Lyon.
Laser disc.
Laser.
They were around in the 80s.
That's Janet's answer. I remember my laser disc. All right. Ricardo.
VHS.
VHS. Katie Hansen. Record player. Yay! Okay, good. Okay. Andrew Lund.
I'll do you one better, Michael. I got Betamax. Betamax.
Betamax was very popular in Europe. They didn't use VHS. All right. Whitney Pipkin.
Car phone.
Car phone. I remember.
We're there.
And Mr. Parker.
Synthesizer.
All right. We got one match on that. All right. How are we doing on time? Where's our timekeeper?
I didn't hear the first of the question.
3 minutes.
Okay. All right. We got lots of questions. Don't worry about that. Janet wants to get out of here, but we're
No, I'm
We're gonna run out of paper.
embarrassed.
Oh yeah. That's a good point. I've
all
been folding mine in
right.
half.
Baby Boomer Bob owns a successful business, but he wants to bring on more millennials. So he added free food and a beanbag chairs to the office, but that didn't work. So instead, he installed a blank.
To the office, did you say?
The office, yes, this is office. So the free food's not working. Beanbag's not cutting. Instead, he installed this to his office to bring on millennials to work there.
Actually, hate sound sharpens.
Okay.
I don't even know this.
So we're going to start with Janet.
Coffee and juice bar.
Coffee and juice bar. Okay, good. Bob Wood.
A Wii.
A Wii.
Okay, I almost said we.
Very good.
Wireless.
Wireless. Okay, like a Wi-Fi you're talking about.
Let's see the real answer.
We're going to go back to our other order here. Stephen Parker.
A nap
Sleep
pod.
Sleep pod.
That's funny.
You don't want to know what happens in the sleep pod.
Stays there.
I forgot the real term, but yeah, nap lounge.
Nap lounge, same thing. Okay, all right. Doesn't matter because it wasn't one of those things. Andrew Lund.
Probably spelled it wrong, but a Keurig machine.
Keurig machine.
So not environmentally friendly.
Know it.
Espresso machine.
We've matched, sort of.
Is that judges?
Yeah.
We're going to go with it. Yes, we're going to go with that. Okay, all right, it's a match. All right.
I'm coming back.
Ricardo.
Beer keg.
Beer keg.
Actually, I would go to that office.
way, I wrote that question, and that's what I was thinking is actually the kegerator, right? So, some of you may know that Governor McCauley is called a kegerator in the governor's mansion.
Nitro beer and Coke.
For the purpose of economic development, and it worked. All right, we're going to go on to our next question, right? So, baby boomer Becky overheard millennial Mackenzie talking about swiping right. She said, the only thing I've ever swiped is blank.
Oh my.
One more time.
This is a PC event, right?
The only thing I've ever
rated?
Or PG.
PG. Either way, PC, PG.
The only thing I've ever
Swiped.
swiped
You're
is
supposed to
blank.
answer how
How they answer.
Okay.
One more time.
One more time?
Baby boomer Becky overheard millennial Mackenzie talking about swiping right. She said, the only thing I've ever swiped is blank.
Man.
Okay.
That's a terrible answer.
Our contestants probably don't have this particular app.
No,
Okay,
I know what it is.
Okay, so we know what it is. All right. Well, Katie, go, since you said you know what it is, I'm going to start with you first.
But the answer's not Tinder, right?
The only thing I've ever swiped is blank.
Loose change?
Bumble.
Loose change.
See, I was thinking of Steel. I was thinking of
Candy. Swiping candy from the lady. All right. And Jen Barnett.
Bumble.
Bumble.
But you weren't supposed to say Tinder.
Bumble.
It's one. It's one.
All right. Stephen Parker.
Credit card.
Credit card.
That's right.
That was the
It
intent.
was a baby.
Whitney Pipkin.
I went really retro. A rearview mirror.
Rear view mirror. Swipe.
Like with your car, you side swipe.
That's good. I like that.
Similar, a car as in an accident, side swipe. Yes.
Katie Hansen.
A charge card.
Charge card. Credit card.
Smart trip card.
Smart trip card.
So I had credit card.
Judges, how
Well, you got it.
Judges,
No, I
excuse me,
didn't.
scorekeeper. Who's ahead at this point in the game?
Katie.
He didn't know his assets. He's got his Excel spreadsheet already made.
Katie.
Looks like Katie Cook is in the lead.
Okay.
Any idea who's second place?
Second place is General Wood.
All right.
Okay,
we're
Janet.
close.
All right.
So much for those pity points.
All right, so we're ready for our next question. Baby boomer Bob loved to read his morning newspaper over a cup of coffee. Millennial Morgan rolled his eyes and said, newspapers? The last thing I used a newspaper for was blank.
There's a lot of things you can do.
I can't believe you look at those old newspapers. The last thing I used a newspaper for was blank.
Yeah, I know. Rat fish. I know, but they don't fish.
By the way, you should all subscribe to your local newspaper.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Newspapers. It's not a technology of the past. They're very relevant in today's world.
Okay.
All right, because she's struggling and working to pull back here from her descent, I'm going to start with Janet Barnett. Janet?
Wash windows?
Wash windows.
It works.
Bob Wood.
Wrap fish.
Rat
Fish.
fish.
That's good. Right, yeah. Rat fish.
It's a
Fish and chip.
Midwestern thing.
Katie Cook.
Fish and chip.
In kindergarten?
Oh,
In
man.
kindergarten,
So if you read it, it says last time I used
newspaper was.
Let's see what they say.
Wait, I'm not sure that I understand your answer, Katie Cook. Explain.
Read that question again. Let's see.
The last thing I used the newspaper for was
Was
blank.
in kindergarten. Like it was a long time ago that you saw a newspaper.
Okay, all right, we're going to go with it. All right. So let's go backwards here. Ben Black.
Man.
Wet shoes.
Wet shoes. Oh, wet shoes on the newspaper. All right. Ricardo.
High school science fair?
High school science fair.
Paper mache.
Katie Hansen.
Starting a
Starting a campfire. Andrew Lund.
Potty trained my dog, Michael.
Whitney Pipkin.
Similar. Lining a camp.
And Mr. Parker.
A roof because I can't afford the rent from all the avocado toast.
Which is excellent.
Did we get any points on that?
Oh, do we get
Paul, was there any points?
Yeah, right, we should have like the best ones.
No, okay, all right. Everyone's gonna have to pull together here for the rest of this game. All right, are we ready for our next question? Good, yes. Millennial Mimi was out to dinner with some friends, and they were having a great time. But for some reason, she couldn't stop herself from blank.
Could you repeat
Stop herself.
Could you repeat it?
Millennial Mimi was out to dinner with some friends, and they were having a great time. But for some reason, she could not stop herself from blank.
Okay.
They were all having such a great time. But there she was, constantly blanking. All right. Janet, since you're in such need of points, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I should have.
Texting! Someone's picking up some points. Bob Wood.
Checking Facebook.
Checking.
I know, I heard that. I got that. They're laughing at me.
checking phone, Instagram?
Checking phone, Instagram, that's a rather universal answer. I'm going to ask our judges to keep that in mind as we go across. Mr. Parker, I'm going to start with you.
Texting.
Texting. Woody Pitkin.
Taking selfies.
Taking selfies. Andrew Lund.
I also said texting, Michael.
Texting. Katie Hansen.
Checking phone.
Checking her phone. Checking her phone. Ricardo.
Looking phone.
Looking at the phone and then what?
I also wrote checking her phone.
Checking her phone. Okay.
But the question
Judges,
is, does
what do we get on?
Instagram disqualify?
All right, we're gonna give Janet 2, and Katie 4.
I'll accept that.
My Facebook is on my phone. That's okay. Sorry. Ready.
So we have 2 more pieces of paper.
2 more to go.
Yeah.
We can recycle.
Wait. Okay, so next question. Gen X George was showing Millennial Mike his trophy collection. There was one for fencing and another one for the academic bowl. Millennial Mike was stunned. He said, "Where are all your trophies for blank?"
Oh, yes. Yes.
Gen X George was showing Millennial Mike his trophy collection. There was one for fencing and another one for the academic bowl. Millennial Mike was stunned. He said, "Where are all your trophies for blank?" You should have a lot of trophies for blank. And I'm not seeing any of them.
I got a Chatter Award when I was 7 years old, Michael.
Continues.
Trophies. Lots of trophies.
Played baseball.
Blank.
So were you reborn? We have all the same.
You should have lots of trophies. Blank.
Wait, older than
But I'm not seeing any of them.
82?
Yeah.
Are you a millennial?
Just barely.
Are you phoning a friend?
81 to... Yeah. Okay, Michael.
That's a different thing. Start with her. I'm still thinking.
Start with her.
It was hard.
Oh, okay.
Can't think forever. All right, so let's start with Katie Cook.
Pokemon.
All right. Trophies for our kids. Wow. Pokemon. Okay. That's really good.
Pokemon trophy.
Does any happen?
Second place.
Second place.
That's good too.
Yeah.
Janet Barnett.
I'm gonna quit.
Jess! Okay.
That's an excellent one.
All right. Well, I heard the lawyer for Stormy Daniels on the way here saying he was playing 3-dimensional chess, so I think maybe that's part of it. Steve Parker.
Competitive karaoke. I like it.
Wendy Pickton.
Can we put ours up together? Ready?
Participation.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Participation.
Participation trophy!
Second place. Second place.
10th plus place.
10th place.
Judges, 10th plus place and second place are not the same thing.
Yeah, we're going to give Bob 4 for second place because that's technically participation.
Oh, wow, that's very, very, very generous. That's very
Thank you, Paul.
Nice.
That's why that's why I brought up the judges. Okay, all right. So at this point, we've come to the end of our game. So I'm going to ask our judges, I'm going to ask our point scoring judge to give us a first, second, and third place. And unfortunately, we only have a prize for the first place. We don't have a prize for the second place.
No participation trophies?
And we have our board member, Elizabeth, that's going to present the prize here in just 1 second. So, Paul.
Yes, sir. So, We decided to award points to Janet for the phone payment question. She was in the ballpark, so we awarded her the 4 points. So let's start with third place is Janet Barnett.
Participation prize. Okay, second place.
Second place is Bob Wood. And in first place, with a whopping 14 points, is Katie.
That's a testament to my immaturity.
Bring it on down.
We have a prize.
Bring it on down.
First place winner here, which is a bag of quinoa.
Oh my gosh, this is a meme.
Hey!
That's great. Thank you, ladies and
Thank you
gentlemen.
so much. We're going to take a break and come back with our panelists.
Katie, if it's not on Instagram, it didn't happen.
I believe that. And then
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start the second round of our
Send a courier.
which
Write notes.
hopefully will not be nearly as entertaining as the first part of the evening, right? So some of you may have noticed the scroll that we've got up here on the screen, which is a Twitter scroll. So if you want your words, your thoughts, your questions even to appear up on that board, all you need to do is either use the hashtag #HereComeTheMillennials, or just use the @ for Agenda Alexandria, which is @Agenda Alexandria, 1A in the middle, Agenda Alexandria.
Can you show me how?
look at his phone.
Not be able to use
We
it.
like nostalgia.
That's pretty good.
Can you make
making
that
a comeback.
flame up? Can you like? I want to see the flame trick again. I saw it out of the corner of my eye and I thought, is something on
Is it
fire?
because they don't, they can't access the internet, or?
It's like a secondary kind of
So,
like phone,
all right,
not
I'm
for
going
shady
to
reasons, just for like a
introduce our
simple
panel.
reason.
So yeah, actually, again, to rescore, to underscore that particular point. If anybody in the room wants to use Twitter or has capacity to use Twitter or is a fan of Twitter, all you need to do is use the hashtag #HereComeTheMillennials. Your thoughts will appear up here on the big screen. By the way, we're not editing these. Anything you put, this is raw, unedited. Anything you put up will appear up there. Okay?
It would be like.
That includes the panel too.
Right.
I'll pick a panel there. All right, so I'm going to introduce our panel and then we're going to get into it, right? So, and then we're going to end right around 9 o'clock, so about an hour from now. So I'm going to start with, at your table you will find the bios of our panelists. I have abbreviated them in the interest of time. So Ricardo Alfaro, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes,
okay,
you are.
good, all right. He is the president of the Alexandria Young Democrats. By the way, we've got a Democrat and a Republican on our panel. We'll get to that. Born in Puerto Rico, Ricardo graduated from the University of Puerto Rico in 2008, has a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. We might need your skills here with the TC crowd.
Okay.
Focused on communications and digital signal processing. For more than a decade, Ricardo has been involved in politics at the intersection of technology, public engagement, and public policy. As the founder of his own technology startup, he worked with a group of colleagues to create Puerto Rico's first hackathon. Hackathon. I want to hear about the hackathon.
Will do.
And did political consulting for candidates in Latin America and Spanish media in Florida. I'm assuming Miami, right?
Yes.
Okay. He was elected president of the Young Democrats of Puerto Rico in 2013, and a year after was appointed appointed technology director of the Young Democrats of America. Most recently, he deployed a light communications framework in Puerto Rico through several partnerships which enabled communities to communicate in the hardest hit areas after Hurricane Maria. However, his greatest accomplishment was late 2014 when he became a father. Then we've got Katie Hansen, the co-founder and chief experience officer at Mechanic, and you'll notice that her photograph is the most interesting and intriguing on your page here. Hopefully we'll get her to talk about the photograph. Katie specializes in humanizing brands through the design of emotional, enjoyable, and exceptional experiences. A strategist, creator, and implementer all in one, she introduces empathy to projects, uncovers what makes brands meaningful to core audiences, and crafts compelling stories and memorable engagement opportunities. Katie brings more than 15 years of experience supporting organizations with leadership and experience design, service design, audience activation, program development, brand managing, and creative campaign development. Then we've got Andrew Lund. Andrew moved to Alexandria in late 2010 to continue working for a California congressman. In 2013, he became Government Relations Associate for the government relations firm CJ Lake that advocates for transportation, defense, energy, environment, and healthcare clients in California and Colorado. Andrew and his wife bought a condominium in Old Town Alexandria in 2013 and have been Old Town residents ever since. Since 2013, Andrew has been involved in following city and Commonwealth issues and has become involved with the Alexandria Republican City Committee and was recently elected chairman of the Alexandria Young Republicans. So we got a Democrat and a Republican. Then Whitney Pipkin, freelance journalist. Whitney Pipkin is a staff writer for Chesapeake Bay Journal and a freelance journal focused on foods, farms, and the environment. Her writing appears in NPR, it's here for public radio, I'm a big fan myself, Civil Eats, The Washington Post, National Geographic, and regional publications such as Alexandria Living, Edible DC, and Virginia Living. View her work at whitneypipkin.com. Clever, very clever putting it in your bio. All right, so I want to start our discussion where we started the evening, which was that millennial job interview with Amy. You guys all remember Amy, right? And I'm sure we've got some reactions on our panel. I hope we have some reactions on our panel. And I have to say, sort of as opening of the discussion, we were conflicted about whether or not to play that video, I have to say, because that video, some people on our board thought it was funny, other people thought it was horrible and awful. And so there was some discussion about whether or not to even play that. I guess obviously we decided to play it. But I'm going to start with Whitney. We'll move left here. Your reaction to that video, was that funny? Obviously they were hitting up stereotypes. Was it fair? Was it representative of your generation? What was your reaction when you saw the millennial job interview?
Well, I think, is this working? Oh, I'll just speak louder. She felt very much younger than me, when she probably was. I have never interviewed for a job like that, but yes.
Can everybody hear Whitney? Yeah. No. Okay.
No.
Try another mic. Can we get?
I think maybe
we can make sure her microphone's
I don't know.
on.
I think these are just for the recording.
Ba 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 ba.
All right.
Okay.
Sorry. Technical
That's
issues.
fine.
Speak right into it.
Oh, like
Yes.
really close? Okay.
Now we're better.
All right. So I worked very hard not to be offended because that would be very millennial of me to be offended. So I wasn't offended. I was just like, that's not me. I would interview a lot better than that because I'm probably 10 years older than her. 15 maybe. So I was telling Andrew, I have 2 kids, so I feel like I identify with people by life stage rather than as a millennial. I don't really identify with that term. So I'm the millennial parent, I guess, which I feel like...
Just to put a point on this, you don't identify necessarily as a millennial?
No, although I was born in '87, so I am firmly, technically, a millennial. I don't feel like that caricature, I don't feel like that identifies me.
Actually, just to underscore this particular point, since we've been planning this, I've just sort of conversationally been asking people, do you consider yourself a millennial as I'm out and about talking to people? And this is actually something that I get all the time. Is
Yeah.
well, yeah, technically I'm a millennial, but I don't really identify as a millennial. This is a common theme,
Right.
actually. We might actually get that several times on our panel. I personally call that millennial denial, right? You are a millennial, right?
Technically, but I don't fit that caricature, I hope. I mean, I have gotten jobs before, and I don't think she got that job, so.
Good point, touche. Andrew, okay, so yeah, speak directly into the microphone, please. So when you watched the video, did you identify with Amy? Did you think that was just a joke? What was your reaction to that?
So first I wanted to thank you and the board for inviting us all here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. In direct answer to the question, I would say that similar to Whitney's comments, that is something that wouldn't say find offensive, but definitely not typifying my particular attitude toward things. I would use the term, and I think I've told some people this before, exennial, which is kind of the individual from, I would say, the beginning of the millennial time, maybe until the early, maybe mid 80s. So since I'm 1982, for those of you keeping track at home, I don't necessarily identify with that same type of person that was portrayed in the film. However, there are, not the film, but the ad, I do see that type of personality around, even very recently, especially with some of our employees at our firm.
What is that attitude? I mean, how would you describe that? Obviously, we saw it in the video, but if you were to describe it to someone here.
Now we're getting into the big E word, the entitlement. I would, yes.
What does that mean? When you say entitlement, what does that mean?
Well, my definition of it would be that someone thinks that they deserve something to which they haven't necessarily either prescribed themselves or earned as either element of the job or some other way, similar to a participation trophy.
Okay. Katie Hansen, when you watched the video, did you identify with Amy? Were you offended by it? Did you think it was funny? What was your reaction to that video?
The video is hilarious, but only because it's meant to be. And sometimes to break into a conversation, you have to do so with humor. But personally, I don't identify with her. Full disclosure, I was born in '79, so I guess I'm in that exennial category too.
Anyone else in the audience identify?
It's a micro-generation.
Exennials. There are several exennials, self-identified exennials.
We have our own little characteristics about us, but
what are those characteristics? How would you describe
well, we had an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. So we didn't grow up with a whole lot of technology in the home. My technology was that record player that I held up the sign. I had a 45 before I had a cassette. My first 45 was Billy Joel's Uptown Girl. But so, I mean, we kind of, I guess the way some people like to say it is we aren't as disenchanted or depressed as Gen X, but we're not as blithely optimistic as millennials. So we kind of balance, we're adaptive and agile, and, we just try to roll with it.
In the audience, raise your hand if you consider yourself a Gen X. Okay, you just insulted about 1/10 of our audience.
I said that's the way other people put it. But yeah, I thought the video was funny. I've experienced it in interviewing candidates, more so that I don't want to start at 8 a.m. I want to start at 10:30. But not so much the people on their phones while they're interviewing. I thought that was a little over the top.
When they say that, do they mean start at 10:30 and stay in the office until 7?
Yeah, I've seen that though. I mean, it's more of a flexible. They want more flexibility and customized work style, life balance, which can be done sometimes. I mean, I own a brand strategy firm, and as long as the whole team is covering between 8 to 7 p.m. across the board, it works for us. But to say that you expect that in an interview is a little over the top, in my opinion. Yeah.
Ricardo Alvaro. So your perspective on this video that we watched, did you identify with that? Did you think that that was just hitting stereotypes, or was that making a serious point that we can learn from here in this context?
I mean, it was funny. I really do not identify with it. I myself look at myself waking up nowadays at 6:30 a.m. thanks to my 3-year-old. And I see myself sometimes in the morning. By the way, I do read the newspaper with a cup of coffee.
The hard newspaper?
Yeah.
Yes, the Washington Post.
Me too.
It is home delivered. And I see myself, as another panel said, in that stage where I sometimes do certain things and act certain ways where it's like, oh, this is why my dad reacted as he reacted when I was a kid. And that's what he meant. Weird and cool at the same time. But no, I have seen that kind of attitude in other people around the environment, but mostly like other people in the office, other people like just coming in and bringing ideas where you sort of like have to filter out a little bit of the attitude part and actually get to the idea part sometimes. But yeah, I personally, again, I didn't really identify with the video, although it's hilarious, I guess.
So I'm going to take a point of personal privilege here and stay with Ricardo for a second and ask you, what the heck is a hackathon? What does that mean? I'm really curious about your bio here with the hackathon.
So a hackathon, I mean, the term hack is, I know it can be problematic, but in reality, it was...
That's a millennial word, by the way.
Yeah. But in reality, it was our first attempt at bringing people that were outside of an industry, your college students, your people that were just geeks and nerds, to come together and program to try to solve solutions. In that hackathon, we were actually aiming at one of the projects was trying to solve everyday issues, such as, for example, just connecting. One of the projects was actually just solving homework tasks and organizing so that you could do college work more effectively. That kind of energy and that kind of project using software was really the driver behind that hackathon, which we later on continued doing in government. By the way, caveat, I also work for the governor of Puerto Rico. So it's kind of, it was a very interesting experience too, as a millennial.
So in terms of questions, I've got a number of questions here in front of me, but we want your questions. So at your table, you should see some sort of Post-it note, sticky note, that you can write whatever questions you want, and we will have board members walking around picking them up. Raise your hand if you're a board member that's going to walk around picking them up. Bob Wood, I'm going to Tweety. Somebody who's going to walk around. Somebody. Okay, all right. We have a board member that's going to walk around picking up your. So if you have any questions, you can write them down on your pad. You can also literally tweet your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got several tweet questions already coming up. You may have read them on the board. One of which I'm going to read here from the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce. Who's tweeting from the Alexandria Chamber? Is that in the back of the room? Someone? Okay, all right, excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to open this up to the panel. Whoever wants to answer the question, please raise your hand. Food for thought. Do you think the term millennial has a stronger negative connotation than any other generation name?
Yeah, definitely.
Any other?
Any other, I would say maybe just close enough.
No,
I think that some people,
generational names,
right, like Gen X and so forth, baby boomer.
About the lost generation. I mean, that's quite negative, isn't it? Right? They were
I guess as a millennial, I don't remember any other generations, right? I'm just kidding.
I think.
You're taking the easy way out.
Wow.
I thought the world began with the millennials, right?
Every generation believes they began with themselves. Right?
I really just think that because of the labor force right now, where you have baby boomers and millennials working together, I think that that's why the sort of rivalry, in a sense, of those two terms.
I'm sorry, sort of what?
Rivalry.
Explain that.
So there's two approaches on how you see different generations working in the labor force. Sometimes you get along, sometimes you become, I think it was your term, entitled. And at the end of the day, you have a difference of experiences and ideas that are mashed together in the workforce, and sometimes it works great, sometimes it doesn't. But as the statistics show that you have boomers either at retirement age right now getting out of the workforce, and then you have millennials coming into the workforce, you're starting to see that generational shift happen. And I'm not talking about just statistics, I'm actually talking about my own experience with my own parents.
I would say that I think Gen X got a pretty bad rep.
Right. That was my second part.
Before the Exennial definition came along, that's how I identified myself. And I think what's been interesting too in looking at generational studies is sometimes the biggest conflict in the workplace happens between Gen X and millennials, because they see baby boomers as kind of like that mentoring leadership figurehead in the office, where they feel a little bit, even though their work styles are very different in their upbringings, they feel more of an affinity towards a boomer than they even do a Gen X. And with Gen X, they just kind of want to just sail past them sometimes and up to the top, whereas Gen Xers typically feel like they've had to put in their work from the beginning, earn their way and move their way up the ladder, because that's what's expected, rather than just being a young talent that can kind of get promoted and move right on up. So there's a lot of tension sometimes, I feel, between Gen X and millennials. But either way, they both got a bad rep. And I don't really, like you said, I don't really know much more about generations before that, and what that. But I also think too, with the proliferation of the media and social media, and the ability to profile millennials in these funny YouTube videos, they're just the negativity is just out there, and the humor is out there in a way that it never was before with any other generation, because it couldn't be. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Okay. All right. So intriguing question for the audience, and an old-fashioned sticky tape here. What do you think of the Parkland students and Alexandria's 11-year-old star? Are these kids talking for a generation? So it's really interesting, because if you think about high school students, depending on how you want to define millennial, they actually could be defined as millennials. Okay. So you may have seen the chart that we had up before, which had the millennial generation as being born all the way up until 2005, I think was the tail end of that. So I don't know how we feel about that. But this current generation of high school students, several of whom we've got in the room here, are these of a piece with the millennials? Are they the same thing? Or what do we think of this generation? And their activism. We've seen them all over the news, right? They're constantly on the news these days. What do we think about this young group of high school students who's sort of emerging into their own right here?
I don't know them personally, but I would say just around the media attention around the Parkland activism recently, I think there's just like a new degree of optimism, kind of this, unbridled optimism that they have finally figured it out. This problem that we've been grappling with for generations of violence and evil in the world, and they're going to, so there's a degree of that. There's also some hope mixed in, so there's positive and negative to their approach to this issue. And I don't know, just it's interesting to hear the way that they talk about the problem. Some of the speeches that have been going viral on YouTube are like, it's this simple is kind of their thesis, and you're like, oh, okay, let's, it's encouraging, but it's also, you kind of are waiting for that optimism to wear off a little bit.
I would pick off on the optimism theme. That is the first generation that was not around for 9/11, and we were all around for 9/11, right. And I personally was in high school, so you hear them and you see that energy and that optimism, but you know very well that they're reading from 9/11 from a textbook, and that the first time that I came to, as in one of our meetings as Young Democrats, just for me talking, the way that I was talking was not resonating with them, and then I sort of like started to ask around for different experiences, and I then realized like, oh, okay, so for us, when we were born, it was the Challenger explosion, and then all that subsequent chain of events. For us, our biggest memory, or at least for me, is 9/11, and then for this generation has been all that's going on recently, and you see that drive and that optimism, which is great, but putting it in that context is, at least for me, it's interesting and just fascinating.
Andrew, I'm going to put you on the spot here and talk politics for a second. We've got a young Democrat and a Republican. What do we make of the issue of guns, right? So we've seen this generation of high school students on CNN in this big thing that happened over the weekend talking about guns. What's the future of the politics of guns?
Well, I would say that in general, the issue around the guns and around what happened this weekend shows that the usage of technology for a political purpose has skyrocketed in the last, maybe even 5 years, to the different platforms that you could use. That makes organizing a lot easier. You can take a local issue and quickly make it national, or you can take a national issue and quickly make it local. I think, with particular reference to guns and the Second Amendment, there is a Second Amendment, as we know, so there will always be that tension, unless, of course, the law is changed to allow for certain prohibitions on said firearms. But I think what this weekend and the events around this last weekend, have shown is that everyone, while you think that you're an individual, you can't hide anymore, so to speak, in this internet age that we have, either through email, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, all of those things. So you cannot retreat from an issue of any political type. There's always somebody who's looking at you or critiquing you in some way, shape, or form.
Like potentially a primary opponent, right? Or a political opponent.
Sure, yeah.
So sticking with this issue of the young people, some of whom are in this room, high school students, what do we call these people, right? Are they millennials? Are they Generation Z? I've heard reference disparagingly to the Tide Pod generation.
Oh, sad.
People that eat.
What do we call these people?
Certainly not by their greatest mistake. It's not their fault that their mistakes are immortalized on YouTube, whereas ours were, maybe there was like a Polaroid or we still printed photos. But that's not fair to define them by the Tide Pod, which is just an unfortunate, that's just so sad. So, I don't know. I'm not a demographer.
I consider them sometimes a survivalist generation. I don't know why. I just think.
Some people refer to them as the 9/11 generation for that reason.
Oh, yeah. See, I didn't even know.
The post 9/11.
I mean, what can you do but survive and band together and make your voice heard and do whatever you can? You can't just fall back into the shadows. You have to get together with people who agree with you and do something. I mean, I think what they've experienced has been, also too, some of the economic downturn. And so from what I've heard from other parents of whatever the generation is called, Gen Z is, I guess, what I hear most often, is that the characteristics that are showing up in their children are of mobility and action, not just sitting around waiting for the participation trophy.
On the concept of Generation Z, I want to put a pin in that here for just a second, which is, that's a reference to Generation X, right? So calling them Generation Z is like saying they're a sequel to Generation X, right?
Yeah.
Which is essentially a placeholder. In fact, the millennial generation, before people started referring to them as millennials, people sometimes refer to them as Generation Y.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a placeholder until we started calling them millennials.
Right.
By the way, for people in the room that might not know, Generation X is a literary reference. There was a book in 1991 called Generation X. It was a fiction book written by a guy by the name of Douglas Copeland. And I was fortunate to have read this book when I was in college because it really sort of crystallized a lot of this discussion in my mind. If you haven't read the book Generation X, you should go out and read it. It's about a group of young, disaffected people, all the stereotypes that one associates with Generation X. And they did not have real jobs. They had what they called MIC jobs, in other words, like McDonald's type jobs and temporary jobs. And they were sort of unconnected to things and disaffected and not caring, and they were cynical, and a lot of the stereotypes that we have about Generation X sort of evolved from that. I also, interestingly, got this sense from talking to our panel here that many, if not most of you, consider yourselves in that transition, right? Like somewhere between Generation X and Millennial. Is that a fair read?
Yeah.
Do any of our panelists actually consider themselves full-on Millennials? Whitney Pipkin, I think you're the youngest.
I know,
right? Yeah.
right. I guess I identify by life stage, so I identify with people, and so in an urban area, most of the people that have a child or two are older than me, but I identify with them because they're at the same life stage. So I'm not going out to eat every night. I'm cooking at home with my Instant Pot every night.
Instant Pot, yes.
Which does make me a little bit of a millennial, but it's amazing.
Right. For those of you that have not discovered the joys of the Instant Pot, I highly recommend it. And actually, while we're on the conversation of food,
Oh, no.
This is your topic.
This is my topic.
So explain the Instant Pot for people that are...
Well, it's a pressure cooker.
Go ahead.
It's a pressure cooker, you know, circa, it's like better than what Audrey Hepburn used in Breakfast at Tiffany's by far. It's never exploded on me. You set it and forget it. It's great for motherhood season. You just kind of put things in, and frozen chicken can be cooked and for dinner that night. So that's my plug for the Instant Pot. In record time, in 30 minutes.
I just turned to her and said, "Is that a crock pot?"
It has a crock pot button, but it also has a porridge button.
Got it.
So I'm going to stay with you here for a minute and talk about food and food trends. We had a good number of laughs here about quinoa earlier in the evening, right? So explain millennial food trends. I know avocado toast is a big one, right?
Well.
Craft beer, quinoa. What are the millennial food trends here that we should keep our eye on?
The millennial trends are the trends. I mean, that's who advertisers and food marketers, that's who they're pinning everything to. The consumer dollars. What was the statistic you had about, somebody had earlier about millennials are spending, it's like a third of retail dollars are attributed to them. So to us, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with my identity up here. So food trends are changing by the minute, by the day. I mean, if you look up millennial food terms or trends, they're seasonal, they're monthly. Something can kind of flame on within a minute. There was, the moment for pink, millennial pink, I think was the color, and that was trending across restaurants. You had rosé kind of go wild. Avocado toast is a joke about how millennials say they don't have any money, but they're willing to spend, $8, $10 on avocado toast, which is toast with avocado smeared on it, which I do consume for breakfast pretty frequently, but I don't pay anyone else to make it for me. So I'm really falling into my millennial.
Quick poll in the audience. Raise your hand if you've ever eaten avocado toast.
There we go.
Now, wait a second. Now, raise your hand if you've never had avocado toast and have no clue what I'm talking about when I say avocado toast. That's about half.
Junction Bakery.
That's right.
So
that's a good
I was in Richmond for the General Assembly session covering the General Assembly, and I was asking several lawmakers if they consider themselves millennial, because I had the list of their birthdays, and I took that Harvard chart that we saw earlier, and I charted out who was like clearly, obviously a millennial, and then I started asking people, do you consider yourself a millennial? And I realized you can't go by those numbers because there's a self-identification thing. Like so some people that were born in 1980, for example, consider themselves millennial, and then there's another lawmaker who was born in 1980 who said, I'm not millennial, I'm millennial adjacent, was her thing, right? So, which actually created a question around her. There are obviously different ways of defining all this stuff. I want to move over to Katie Hansen here and talk about marketing, which actually is sort of piggybacks on what we were just talking about. How do you market to a millennial? We've got lots of people in this audience who want to sell stuff to you and your cohort and your generation, right? So, what is the most important thing in marketing to a millennial?
I think, well, it depends what you're marketing and what type of business you have, but I think the most important thing is your story and your messaging and showing that you're purpose-driven, so what your purpose is over your profit. In particular, I think millennial, you don't always have to be giving part of your proceeds to charity or something like that, which is nice and popular, but you have to show the meaning in what you're delivering. Another thing to do, if you can, is to kind of customize experiences as much as you can. So, I think millennials are used to getting things the way they want it and getting things quickly. So whether you're, a storefront and you can kind of bring people in and have them try out your product, or give people discounts and certain ways to have people refer your business, those are all popular things with millennials. So I think in the sharing economy in particular, with the emergence of Yelp, if there's anything I don't know, like if I need a plumber, or if I need to send my kid to a karate class, or if I need to do anything, I go to Yelp first, because I trust consumers,
The wisdom of the crowd.
and my neighbors,
Right? I mean, that's what
and people, before I trust, I just go there first.
And
So,
the same is
yeah.
true of food. Studies show that millennials trust their friends and family for nutrition advice more than experts.
Well, that's a little different than Yelp. You're talking about the Facebook approach, essentially, right?
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
looking at the opinion of
Sure.
your friends and
Right.
people that you already know, versus Yelp, which is a bunch of strangers, right?
I mean, but Facebook may or may not be people you actually know. I mean, that's crowdsourcing essentially.
It could be
It's
Russian bots.
it's like popular vote of your friends, I guess, friends with quotes,
All
Facebook
right, I
friends.
want to take an analog to the last question I asked, which is about marketing to millennials. We have lots of people who are business people in the audience that want to market to millennials, but we also have a handful of political people in the room who want to get votes from millennials. So I'm going to ask our two political people here. I'll start with Ricardo. So if you are running a campaign, of which many people in the room run campaigns, right? So is there anything different about a millennial? Do you sort of approach them from a political sphere in a way that you would do differently from someone else?
I think that mostly on the transparency and participation side. One of the things that, and I'm going to talk about my own personal experience back in Puerto Rico when we were running the 2012 gubernatorial race. We did this application with iPads, and we hit the beach, and we started to get participation from beachgoers, and those ideas actually ended up in the now former governor's government platform. That obviously nowadays it's more digital in terms of using Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms. But
When you say hit the beach, explain that.
just going to the beach with an iPhone, an iPad, and just literally walking around with an iPad on the beach, going to people directly and asking them, identifying as a candidate and getting their say in terms of specific issues that they were worried about. We did it open-end, so it was like anything. But to your initial question, I think that participation and transparency are two key elements.
Transparency, explain that. I'm not sure that I follow that. What do you mean by that?
Transparency in the sense of not only what your issues are, but also where your funding is coming from, where all your public disclosures. I think that, at least in my experience, that resonates a lot. Because obviously if there's an interest behind what you're saying. And that, again, fuels back to the participation part. So you want to know if your candidate is being genuine or if it's actually the fundraising that is doing the talk.
Andrew, same question to you. When you're sort of devising a political strategy, is there an approach to millennials that is maybe more effective or less effective than other generations?
Okay, is everyone ready for this? If you want to run a successful campaign of any type, do not call the millennials. Everyone got that? Write that down? Okay, do not call because they won't answer their telephones. All right?
By the way, I want to join in that bipartisan approach.
So that's, in my view, somewhat jokingly, but mostly seriously, that is the number one lesson for millennials. I can't tell you the number of times where I've tried to call someone and not received a response, but then gotten it after I text them, they're right there. So they were there the whole time. They just don't like to actually talk to people on the telephone, which is also something that I think polling companies need to think about when they're doing polls and assessments. And maybe it had something to do with our most recent polling in this most recent federal election. There are, as I say, fewer people that are actually answering the phone. So there have to be new ways, mostly social, to get to those people. I would, echo Ricardo's comments about finding out about issues that individuals care about on almost a micro-targeting level. This was something that was done back in 2006, I think, or at least as far as I first learned about it in 2006, I should say, with looking at trends of purchasing trends and extrapolating those out into political, I guess, affiliation, for lack of a better term. So that kind of data is very valuable I would say, to campaigns these days. And, for our membership, we communicate almost exclusively through Facebook or emails. And if we have to call, to say that I'm over here at Windmill Hill Park and you're over there, so we need to pick up the telephone. Doesn't quite work as well with a text message. But in general, number one rule, don't call millennials.
What if your job is talking to people on the phone, though? That's what I'm doing. All right, so a question from Twitter. I want to hear the panelists on Alexandria's ranking for millennials. Alexandria's ranking for millennials. Accurate? Inflated? Why is that? Any thoughts on it?
As the number one.
Yeah, I think it was in our intro. I think Terry mentioned. Terry, was it the? Yeah. What was the ranking exactly? Number one for millennials from a magazine or a website or
web magazine?
Website. ACVA's creating this list or something?
No. It was Smart Asset. Smart Asset.
Good name.
Yeah, just don't stop too soon.
Smart ass. Any thoughts about smart ass ranking? Good, bad, indifferent? So what does that even mean, number one, for millennials? I mean, I have to say, actually, as someone who spent some time, sometimes I leave Alexandria and I'm in Arlington and I see, everybody in Arlington seems so young. It's crazy, right? So it almost seems like Arlington is way more of a magnet for millennials than Alexandria is, right? So how did Alexandria end up being number one? I mean, what's influencing smart ass sense?
Well, that's my thoughts exactly. It's I feel like all the young people are in Arlington, but I don't know. Maybe they're so young they're not even millennials anymore. I mean, but if you're in DC or Arlington, you do feel like the crowd is younger. But maybe that ranking is compared nationally, and maybe it's taking into account, who actually lives in Alexandria, which I've been surprised since I started writing for Alexandria Living. I've been asking more people, getting to know more people that live in Alexandria. Maybe they do live in Alexandria, they just recreate in the broader region. And depending on more their life stage, would I say determine where they eat out in particular. So when I eat out in Clarendon with my children, I feel very old. Whereas, in Alexandria, that's more where I would go with my kids,
Good use of recreate as a verb, too. I want to go to the panel here. How would you rank social media options, most important to least important? This is a question.
Ooh.
Old school post-it note here. Social media options, most important to least important.
So could I infer from that question they want a ranking of the platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and so on and so forth?
Social media options is the way they phrase it, but platforms, I think that's fair.
I feel like the marketing person would have
that. Well, I mean, they all have different. They all.
Explain that. So how would you use it differently?
So the main ones that we use for our clients are Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and then actually lastly Twitter. There's been trends that are showing Twitter might be on its way out.
What?
I know, sorry. But
Just learn how to do it.
it all depends on, yeah. Facebook still remains the universal platform when it comes to marketing for, social advertising and things like that.
The Kremlin.
Yes, every age group is still on Facebook. But when it comes to reaching some of the more people in their 20s and teens, they're more on Instagram and Snapchat. And then if it's anything to do with sharing more content and anything more professional networking, that would be your LinkedIn channel primarily, even for millennials, for sure.
Twitter is still valid for news,
absolutely.
for disseminating and consuming news and political views.
Yeah, I was actually gonna add to that. Twitter has become, when we saw it, more as the equivalent of AM radio.
That sounds so boring.
No, I know, and no disrespect to anyone, but it was where you would gather where you would get your breaking news, where you would get your news, and you would see figures. If you want a direct, verified quote from a source, you would go to Twitter.
Yeah, you have to be on there to be a news professional, but it's very easy for me to separate. I'm only on there professionally, not personally. Whereas my Facebook, it's kind of quasi. And Instagram, I've actually dabbled in maybe having 2 profiles on Instagram, which seems so, just navel gazing to even be thinking about that. But that's what, you have to be so oriented toward your audience on Instagram that you don't, if you want too many baby pictures, and people will not.
I actually on the baby picture, now that you bring it up, just as a comment, there isn't a single picture of my kid on Facebook.
Oh, no. Are you going to make me feel bad about it?
No, not at all. It's mostly because of my IT background, I guess, that I sort of he's going to have a lot of Throwback Thursdays. But from my perspective, it was I started to think to myself, someday he will have an account, and I'll want him to decide what he will post on his own. Sorry, no meaning on. But he has lots of baby pictures, but you won't find them on Facebook. Oh, except for one on a wedding. But yeah.
And I'm, for the record, I'm firmly against horrifying that will embarrass my children. No potty training pictures, for example.
Right. I saw one today.
I'm that's just, he's going to be on the internet someday. And
exactly.
He's going to be like, Mom, really? So that's right on the line.
All right. And I would say that Facebook is good for news and certain opinion pieces, and there may be too many of those on Facebook, in my opinion. And Twitter is great for finding food trucks. That's how I use it, for news and food trucks. So if you're a food truck vendor, please put your food truck on Twitter. I will follow you. I do not have Instagram, but my wife tells me it's great. So I guess there are different, I would say, different media platforms for different people. But to echo some of the comments made earlier, the Facebook and Twitter are kind of the 2 that I think have the largest audience if you're looking to hit the most people, I would say.
All right, we're having so much fun. I really hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we need to wrap this up at some point. I do have a thought-provoking, I know, it's all. I do have a thought-provoking last question from the audience on an old-fashioned sticky note here, which is many of these millennial stereotypes, classic stereotypes, they seem like your sort of garden variety stereotypes of young people. In other words, you could take this exact same stereotype 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and say, kids today, essentially, right? How many of these stereotypes...
Bye Bye Birdie's a great film. What's the matter with kids today, right? Dick Van Dyke, anybody? No?
Bye Bye Birdie.
Thank you. I'm trying to, broaden myself.
How many of these stereotypes are basically just young people, right? So you could take this stereotype and say it of young people 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And how many of them are specific to this generation? Any thoughts as to whether or not we're sort of unfairly tagging millennials with stuff that could be applicable of any young generation at any time in the past?
It's like youth with a megaphone. With social media, the addition of social media, just you get to make all of your mistakes, all of your, your giant ego that you have, your invincibility. You get to have it on a much larger stage. So I think that's why there's such criticism. Is we just all get to witness this life stage that of youth that we wouldn't all want to have practiced on a huge stage that they have with social media.
So,
Are they garden variety stereotypes of young people or unique to millennials?
I mean, I think they are garden variety, but they're exacerbated by the tools they have to express themselves, you know, having not really thought through that expression, I guess.
Any other thoughts?
I would say, getting back to my Bye Bye Birdie reference, people have been talking about what's the matter with kids for quite some time. So there is some of that. That's the garden variety youth. What's the matter with kids? Oh, nothing's the matter with kids, right? But, you know, to echo Whitney's comments, definitely the platforms and perhaps the need to be liked. There was a recent Frontline documentary on the likes and that whole phenomenon. I recommend it to you for those who are interested in Frontline, the PBS show. But it definitely does magnify people's likes, dislikes, vulnerabilities, and so on. And so and somewhat the entitlement, they believe that if they are wronged, right, they can go to these social media platforms and express themselves, and the outrage will cause someone to back down, perhaps. So that is one thing that I would say would be unique, and then the rest of it may or may not be unique.
Katie Hansen.
I think these were great comments made. I actually agree with them, but I also think that it's not universal to every generation. I definitely think there are some differences between each generation.
Like what? How would you describe them?
I think just looking at different styles in parenting and looking back at your own childhoods and things you experienced kind of influence how you parent, which then influences.
Millennials famously had helicopter parents, whereas Generation
Right. So I was a latchkey kid, but I've definitely experienced the helicopter parenting, and I'm going to make sure I don't do that.
Latchkey because people also talk about Generation X as being the latchkey generation,
Right.
because their parenting was not as engaged as it could have been for two reasons. One, the divorce rate went way up, and then also women enter the workforce.
I think, I mean, all my friends had dual income households.
That was helicopter parents, right? So we saw a huge shift there between latchkey generation and helicopter parents.
So that will definitely impact how youth act. So I would say that yes, there are some things that carry across as kids these days and things like that, but there are unique differences in generations, and the generation now will be very different from millennials, I find. Yeah.
Ricardo, any final thoughts there?
Yeah, as I said, I read the newspaper with a cup of coffee. My dad used to do the exact same thing. My kid, though, manages the iPad and the Apple TV in ways that even I can't, and he's just 3. He bought a whole series on Apple TV, and I saw the charge, and I'm like, what is this? Why are we, what? But those are the contrasts. What I will say, though, is I think that there are unique differences. I feel that we were the first generation to stop riding a bicycle and to start being plugged into AOL and CompuServe. And that shift from VHS to Blu-ray, and now not even Blu-ray anymore, to just streaming, in a way affects us. And you see certain trends that can be very similar, like no more watching TV after X hour. That still happens today. But there are other unique differences that you just have to shift and start to mold yourself to the times. So I think that there is a little bit of kids these days, but I think that there are also very unique differences and challenges.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank our panelists very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let me echo that thanks. And Michael, to you. Can you tell he's a journalist? He just drives on. He gets the questions in. He does a wonderful job. We're so proud of Michael. We're proud of you, and we're real thankful for all of you for being here with us to hear some interesting perspectives. I think when you started talking to each other, you moved to a different plane. We were eavesdropping on some remarkable discussion. Thank you very much for what you said. Thank you for the insights. I think we all learned something, and that's the goal of Agenda Alexandria, to get different perspectives, and then come away with a little more understanding of, frankly, almost the majority of Alexandria, soon to be millennials, or if not already so. I think already so. So well, that's right. We'll ask you. There was some millennial denial going on, but you sure, you showed us at the end when it came to child rearing and things like that. Thank you for your perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, you're the most important part as well. Being here, supporting us, being with us in Agenda. You give us a lot of energy. Let's give yourself a hand, please. Let's get home safely. Reminder, on the 23rd of April, our next program, real mild program, Road Rage. But I'll tell you, we put together a great panel for us to discuss the issues without taking sides. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Bob, one announcement. We had almost 200 tweets today on the Here Comes the Millennials hashtag.
All right, we had a record 200 tweets today. Thank you.